All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this installment. This is foreign policy between World War One and World War Two. Specifically, we're talking about our Roaring '20s presidents and FDR. Uh, we've got to the point of Wilson ending World War One with the Treaty of Versailles, wanting to bring democracy to all, the idea of the League of Nations, which the United States doesn't get into. And so now we get to our presidents of the Roaring '20s. Now, their policy is and it's very easy to think Republican-wise in the sense of President Trump, former President Trump, and his America First, okay? All about business, making unilateral decisions for America, and this is what happened. And so these presidents, Harding, Coolidge, and Hoover, are going to try to step us back from this policy of intervention that we saw with the progressive presidents, specifically Wilson, to more of just really trying to keep it about us and it based on economic situations, because after World War One, we'll be the major manufacturing and financial country of the world, especially after World War One, with all those loans going to Germany, France, Britain, and throughout. Okay, when we talk about our policy, a lot of it specifically focuses on Latin America. Remember, we'll stay out of the League of Nations. We want to make unilateral decisions, which means decisions just for us, and most of the time this stems from our business with those countries. One great example is something called the Red Line Agreement, which is a reason for some of our problems now. It was basically an agreement between Britain, France, and us, dividing up the oil in regions of not only the Middle East but Latin America. And we can see the importance of that oil from those areas, and kind of our decisions start to build up there to where we get to now. Also, we say we don't want to dispatch troops, but we will if our economic threats, our interests are threatened. And one of the best examples of this is Nicaragua, which will have troops in from 1912. Okay, so it has been a while with Wilson. They'll be pulled out in 1925, but they'll be pulled out, they'll be sent back, and they'll be there from 1925 to 1933, basically protecting our investments there, specifically with oil. As you can see in the picture, that's Coolidge standing on Cuba, where we had the Platt Amendment, and Nicaragua there with fighting going on, as they had much government upheaval there at the time. Now, we do get FDR, and he comes in and shakes things up. He's going to take us back to this idea, or he's going to continue the idea, I should say, from those Republican presidents of trying to stay out of other people's business and just trying to be a good neighbor, which is why we get his good neighbor policy. And so it's going to revolve around these ideas. He's going to recognize the Soviet Union, which had not happened before. He really does not care necessarily to promote democracy as long as those nations are helping us. So there are some totalitarian or some dictators that he'll support. Nicaragua, which will get one, he'll support. Obviously, he'll support the Soviet Union, and recognize the Soviet Union government, which had not happened. And remember, Stalin comes into power. Lenin takes power in 1922 after don't quote me on that, but early 20s when Lenin will take power officially after the Russian Civil War, and then we'll get Stalin. But FDR is the first president to recognize the Soviet Union as the government there. He'll axe the Roosevelt Corollary, which means we're not going to go intervene militarily in Latin Americans' internal affairs. That's between them. Let them handle it. We'll repeal the Platt Act Amendment in Cuba, that we can interfere there, except for the point that we're going to keep Guantanamo Bay, and we're going to support dictators throughout the world that, supports U.S. business, because it's good for business. Now, this deal with World War II looming. We get fascism that grows in Italy. We get fascism, as we call it, Nazism, grows in Germany in the 1920s. We get Japan invading Manchuria, then China. And so FDR will come out and he'll condemn those things, but he doesn't have a lot of public support. He also has to kind of follow along with Britain and France with their policy of appeasement, and that's what you need to know, and you should know from modern world history. And so the public perception in the United States is for isolation. For a couple things. Scared of communism, so fascism doesn't look that bad. Brings stability. It's way better than communism. Supports capitalism and strong nations. Business was good. We were trading with both Germany, which Henry Ford was doing crazy business with Germany in the 1930s, including using slave labor from the German government to make his cars, but we won't talk about that. And then also we were providing Japan with 80% of their oil, which when we cut off their oil, it's kind of a big deal. 80%, that's a B minus. That's pretty good. That's a lot. Okay, and so business was good for us, and so why would we want to, ruffle feathers? And then also, many in the United States felt that entering World War I had been a mistake. And so those sentiments will be throughout the country at this time. However, we'll slowly, and to show this, we'll get the Neutrality Act, specifically 1935, 1936, and 1937, kind of showing this. Hey, we're not going to sell arms, guns, okay, munitions, or have our people travel on ships of countries that are fighting. And that should not say countries at arms. It should say countries. It can say countries at arms or fighting, okay? And then we take that a step further, saying we won't loan them money. And then with the Spanish Civil War, this idea between basically fascism and communism, this fight, and which side are you going to join? We're just going to stay out of it. We're not going to sell arms to them. And so we get those acts. Now, this is why we're dealing with a lot of stuff from the Great Depression. So, we have enough domestically to worry about, or within our country to worry about. We also got FDR reelected in 36, but as we head to 1940, things are changing. Okay, it's becoming a little bit more heated. We're getting the breaking of the Treaty of Versailles by Germany and Hitler, and so we're going to tend to push, and FDR is going to push us towards this idea of intervention. He sees this coming. He doesn't think the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean are big enough to keep this war from us. Which many Americans felt like it could be. And so he'll push us towards what we'll call our allies, just right off the bat, especially Britain. First thing we'll do is what was called cash and carry for Britain, who controlled the seas, although we do get the undersea boats doing a great job in the Atlantic. But the cash and carry was basically, hey, Britain, you pay in cash, and you transport goods, we'll sell you arms. So bring your ships over, give us that cash, homie, and take those back and fight the good war. When he is elected, and both candidates in the 1940 election promoted this, they'll pass the Select Service Act, which will be our first peacetime draft, just kind of getting prepared. Okay, so we get that, and then really we take a real big step forward with the Lend-Lease Act of 1941. This is like, hey, it's coming. Come on, people. And so we're going to lend aid to Britain, China, and the Soviet Union if they promise to return it. Hey, you can use that tank. Just give us back to us once you're done with it. Thank you. The rationale was, what, you wouldn't lend a fire hose to your neighbor if their house was on fire? Okay, and that was kind of the rationale with that. We also, and this is what's going to get us into Pearl Harbor, we're going to freeze Japanese assets, which virtually halted trade, and think oil 80%. They're seagoing. Their navy's getting big in Japan. They don't have oil now, as we provided much. This is going to kind of push Japan's cards. We're really focused on Europe, but at the same time, we got to start looking at Japan. With that being said, we're still out of the war. It's not big enough to get us into the war yet. We want to stay out. We're still kind of fighting the Great Depression. We had that recession that hurt us. And so it's not that big a deal until Pearl Harbor. Okay? And on that note, one video under 10 minutes. Yeah. Have a great weekend. Adios.